Welcome to the Orange County Atheist TV show. My name is Bruce Gleason, and this is Mark Smith. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
We hope you'll enjoy a very lively conversation of what atheists are all about on this show. I'm sure you will be tempted to think about your own ideas of religion and what the world really means to you while we progress through this show and each show following.
This show is not to convert anyone to atheism, but to discuss what atheism is for those who have unanswered questions about their religion and those who are agnostic.
If you have any questions or comments, you can email us at ocatheists@backyardskeptics.com, or we do have a phone answering service at 714-998-8682.
We also support our friends at atheistunited.org, Atheists, Orange County Atheists, and all the meetup groups on meetup.com.
There are many atheist and skeptic groups all around the country. Just Google atheist and your city or county, and you could find out how you can get in touch with other atheist groups in your area, or simply go to meetup.com.
This show is about Christianity doesn't work as advertised.
Well, let's talk about that, because you are an expert at Christianity because you used to be an evangelical Christian. Is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't label myself as an expert, but I've had 20 years of experience with it from the inside.
From the inside, and slowly you came over to be an agnostic after researching the Bible. In fact, I understand the Bible is what turned you into an agnostic and eventually a strong atheist. Is that correct?
Yep. Bible study. The particular denomination I was in really emphasized Bible study, and they did a good job of teaching it, and that's what got myself, and actually there's a few other preachers from that church that have left also from Bible study.
Really?
Farrell
I didn't know
Till
that.
wrote, had published a really nice magazine for several years. He was an ex-Church of Christ preacher.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about the "not as advertised" slogan that you've quoted on your webpage many times. By the way, let's go ahead and promote his webpage right now, Mark. Go ahead.
jcnotforme.com.
That's the numeral 4, is that
Yes,
correct?
the numeral 4.
Well, let's talk about "not as advertised." Now, there's many, many contradictions in the Bible. We're going to be getting to some of those a little bit later. What is it that's not advertised correctly, or is, should I say, in error of promising for what it will give?
Well, when a person is thinking about becoming a Christian and maybe attending the church and listening to the sermons, he builds up an expectation of what to expect when he buys this product. And the product is advertised quite nicely, lots of TV shows and signage devoted to it. It's hard to find a town that doesn't have a cross somewhere on some hill. What happens a lot of times, though, is the further one gets into being a Christian, you start discovering that some things just don't work.
What are those things that don't work? And
Well,
I'm sure that you're going to lay it on me thick and heavy.
Probably the most obvious one, and this is thrown at Christians by atheists all the time, Matthew 17:20, where Jesus says that if you have faith, even as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move here, and it will move, and jump into the sea, whatever.
Well, of course, the Christians are thinking metaphorically. If you actually ask them, where is the last mountain that has been moved?
That's probably one of the explanations for it. What I like to point out, though, is Jesus didn't say you need a lot of faith, just a teeny tiny minuscule bit of faith. A mustard seed is extremely small. Mm-hmm. And yet not one mountain has ever been moved by Christian prayer. So that's a fairly obvious one. Christians don't precede road crews when building mountain roads up in the Rocky Mountains.
Well, just to add to that, I know you're the expert on this particular one, but I happen excuse me, have a wonderful book, The Encyclopedia of Biblical Errancy by Dennis McKenzie, and it says in here, John 14:12, "He that believeth on me, the works that I do, he shall do also. And greater works these shall he do. That means the believer can actually do things more miraculous than Jesus. I haven't seen that.
That would seem to be the promise there, and we have yet to see that.
Now, again, we're not trying to be Christian bashers here. In fact, I've tried to format this show to where we aren't Christian bashers, but we do allow ourselves the right to question the Bible. I feel that if people read the Bible sincerely and read about the contradictions in the Bible and try to explain them, that it will show them why, in part, why we are both atheists. And I think that Mark has had that experience directly because it's the only of the reading of the Bible that took you away from your faith. Is that correct? It wasn't anybody that came into your life and said this isn't true.
And it wasn't something I did willingly or happily. I was very saddened by it and came out kicking and screaming. You don't want to admit to yourself that you basically wasted 20 years of your life. It is not an easy decision.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why people don't want to read books like this that are very religious, because they're afraid that they'll be taken away from their faith. But where in the Bible does it say you must read all of the Bible? You must study it earnestly.
I believe when Paul wrote to Timothy, study to show thyself approved, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Paul commanded Christians to study their Bible and to do a good job of it.
Well, that's all you have to do to find all the contradictions. In fact, as you can see in this book, I've written down my favorites, but with Post-its, but there's about 2,500 on this book, and all you have to do is look at Google and put Bible contradictions, and you'll see all those contradictions, as well as the apologetic stance on each particular contradiction, which I find amusing because I have read some of the apologetic excuses, and a lot of them, most of them, are fairly weak excuses. They just don't make any sense if you. It's almost as much sense as trying to read some of the parts of the Bible. They're so confusing.
Yeah.
They were written so ambiguously, they can be misinterpreted almost in any direction.
Some of them remind me very much of Bill Clinton's is speech back in the 90s, trying to explain away the Monica Lewinsky affair. The amount of minutia that is dug up and examined in trying to explain away these contradictions, it's ridiculous.
Well, what else do you have that is not advertised?
Well, one of the things that people
Actually, not
are
advertised. I shouldn't say that. I should say as not advertised.
yes, does not work as advertised.
As advertised.
People are promised more happiness and joy in their life by becoming a Christian. This is often brought up at altar calls, revival meetings. Are you unhappy? Are you sad? Jesus promises joy and happiness in your life. Come to Jesus. Well, this is one of the promises made, and what is the reality? The Barna Research Group is a Christian, not an atheistic, a Christian polling group that makes its living polling Christians and also digging into other polls and research groups that have gone before. And George Barna runs it. He's a fundamentalist Christian. And some of the things he's shown are that depression rates among born-again Christians are equal to or exceed that of the general population. I.e., being a Christian does not make you any happier or joyful than a non-Christian. Again, if Christianity was real, if there really was this Holy Spirit inside empowering you, you would expect to see Christians vastly outweighing non-Christians in their happiness. You wouldn't have to argue about it. It would be an obvious fact, and it turns out that it's not. Christians are no happier than non-Christians.
Well, you would expect that if you have a religious community that has somewhat of a social network along with their community, that they would actually be happier simply because of the social network, not even count all the prayers and all the promises that you're saying that God has and Jesus have promised. That alone should make you happier just because you're in a social community.